Today is the first United Nations International Widows Day, bringing attention to the plight of 245 million widows and their children around the world. The Lumba Foundation, a global advocate for widows, was instrumental in bringing this day about. And joining us this morning, Lumba's president, Cherie Blair, who's an attorney and, of course, the wife of former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. Great to have you with us this morning.
I'm delighted to be here, Erica.
So we hear these numbers, 245 million around the world, some 500 million children who are a part of these families now, of these women who were widowed. Why is it so important to talk about widows?
Well, there are 6 of the world's population. 100 million of those 245 million women live in extreme poverty on less than $1 a day. And if we're really serious about reaching the Millennium Development Goals, breaking poverty, getting children into school, ensuring that women have equal rights, then we need to do something about the plight of widows.
What is the biggest challenge? I mean, you mentioned the 100 million who are living in poverty on less than $1 a day, but within their own communities, what are their biggest challenges typically?
Well, interestingly, of course, poverty is a big challenge, but that's not simply a challenge for widows. But in many communities in South Asia, in Africa, there are these social taboos about widows, which actually the discrimination that widows suffer and the fact that often when they lose their husband, they lose all their rights to be considered human beings. Their property is taken from them. Sometimes their children are taken from them. These are the real social issues, and by standing up and saying that whatever the practices in the past may have been, in the 21st century these practices are unacceptable is really an important part of challenging these cultural taboos, which are just wrong.
And they can be shunned, I mean, in so many ways, to the point where, I mean, I remember reading stories, of course, in 2001 when the United States, along with Great Britain, you know, your husband and also George W. Bush working to bring troops in. We're talking a lot about Afghanistan, of course, in this country today. But the plight of women there and what we had heard about women who were widowed, who couldn't leave their house. They had 5 children to feed, but they were not allowed to leave their house. The Taliban would not let them. Are conditions changing in places like Afghanistan, for example?
Well, Afghanistan has the highest proportion of widows to the population in the world. It's some 27%. And unfortunately, particularly in areas controlled by the Taliban, women's plight is still very difficult. Because if, in fact, you're not allowed to support yourself, you're not allowed to go out without a man, and you lose your husband, then you really are stuck. And that means not only are you stuck, but your children are stuck. Because we have to remember, sometimes when we talk about widows, we think elderly women. But we're talking about, across the world, many, many women whose husbands died prematurely, whether through HIV, AIDS, through poverty, through war and conflict. And those women will be the ones with the younger children. If they can't support their children, it also means that their children don't get educated, their children may be forced into prostitution, they may be forced into prostitution, and a vicious circle of decline continues.
Is there any concern, too, with the drawdown of troops in Afghanistan, how that may affect the plight of these women and their children?
Well, it's all about what's going to happen to Afghanistan as gradually we withdraw from there, and whether there's going to be a properly functioning government that is committed to the idea that women are equal to men and who will protect these women. And of course, I saw yesterday on your program about the widows here in America, because you were celebrating the troops coming home, but we have to remember too that there are women here whose husbands didn't come home from Afghanistan, who are also suffering, because as they lose their husbands, they also may well lose their right to health care, their breadwinner. They may be struggling to keep up the lifestyle that they had before their husband was killed.
Some of the things that folks don't always think about, but so important to bring them to their attention. So it's such a pleasure to have you with us today. Thanks for coming by.
It's my real pleasure.
And best of luck, too,
Thank you.
with the efforts.